Alright guys, so what we're going to do today is review a little bit of something from Algebra 2, and we're going to talk about how to graph circles and ellipses. So the first thing we're going to look at is standard form of a circle, the way you write those equations. So in the standard form of a circle, in that equation it's x minus h squared plus y minus k squared, and that equals r squared. So you have the x and the y in that equation in both those places. Now parts of that equation, what those mean, if you remember, h comma k, that's the center of your circle. And then r is the radius. Then for standard form of ellipse, it looks a little bit differently because an ellipse, is longer on one side and isn't the same, doesn't have the same radius everywhere. So in ellipse standard form, it's still x minus h squared, but that's divided by a squared. And then I have y minus k squared divided by b squared. And that is always equal to 1. So you have to be careful on those equations that they always are equal to 1. And now on this equation, just like the very first one, h and k is still my center. Then if you look, that a, it's squared on the equation, but the actual a, the a is underneath the x, so the a is the distance of is the radius of the x-axis. So it's how far away from the center you go in the x direction. The b that's the radius of the y-axis, because it's underneath the y. So if you think about this one, if that b number is bigger, then that ellipse is going to be bigger up and down. But if that x number is bigger, that one's going to be bigger side to side. That's how we can tell if it's a vertical or a horizontal ellipse. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're actually going to look at some of these equations and we're going to draw our graph from it. So we're going to start with circles. And again, an easy way to tell which kind of a graph it's going to be is based on that equation. So remember, circles, you're not dividing by everything, and it has to be equal to the radius. So if you look at this very first question, we actually have some work we need to do first. This equals 0. I can't have a radius of 0, and I have that minus 169 that I need to move. So before I even look at this equation, I need to move that 169. And now this is in standard form, so I can just find my center, which is going to be at 0, 0, because I'm not subtracting anything with the x and the y. Then my radius, r squared, is 169, which means that r is 13. So then to draw my circle, I just need to go 13 away in every direction from my center. So I'll go up to 13, down to negative 13, over to 13, and over to negative 13. And those are the outermost points of my circle. Alright, then if we look at this next one over here, my center I need to do first. So the center, remember, it's not going to be a positive 3 because standard form is x minus 3, is x minus my h, which means that my center is actually going to be at a negative 3 and then a positive 1. Then my radius is the square root of 81, which is 9. So in order to graph this, the first thing I'm going to mark is my center. So I'm going to go to negative 3, 1, and that's my center. Then I'm going to go 9 away from that center, up, down, right, and left. So if I go up 9, I'll be up at 10. If I go from the center left 9, then I would be at negative 12. If I go down 9, I'll be at negative 8. And if I go right 9, I'll be at 6. So I just need to connect those 4 dots, and there's my circle. Not a very good circle, but pretend it's perfectly round. So on an ellipse, alright, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to find our center, our x-axis radius, and our y-axis radius. So to start, let's find our center. And in this case, my center is going to be 0, 0, because there's nothing I'm subtracting from my x and my y. Then I'm going to look at my x-axis radius. That's the one that's underneath the x, so that's going to be the square root of 25. So I'm going to go 5 to the left and right. Then I'm going to do my y-axis radius, which is going to be the square root of 4, which is 2. So I'm going to go up and down 2. So that means I'm going to plot these points here. I'm going to go from 0, 0 as my center. To the side, I'm going to go over 5 and left 5. I'm going to go up 2 and down 2, which means my ellipse is going to go through those 4 points. And it should actually hit those points, but where's my ellipse? Alright, then this last one here to graph, I'm going to find my center first. My center is going to be at the 0 of that factor, basically, what makes that factor equal 0, which is -1 and -6. Then my x radius is going to be the square root of that bottom number with the x. That means my x radius is 1. And then my y radius is the square root of what's under the y. So that y radius is going to be 6. So in order to graph this, I'm going to plot the point -1, -6. I made that a little too far. There's my -6. And that's my center. Then to find those vertices, I'm going to go to the left and right 1. So I'm going to go to 0 and -2, -6. Then I'm going to go up from that center 6. So I'm going to up 6 to 0 and down 6 to -12. And then I just need to connect those 4 vertices, and I have my ellipse. Alright, so the last thing to look at is if I actually have the graph and I need to write the equation from the graph. So I've got a circle and 2 ellipses here to look at. So remember, for standard form of a circle, there are 2 things I need. I need the center, and I'm going to need the radius. So my center here, if you look, those vertices both have an x value of -1, and they both have a y value of -2. Which means my center here has to be at -1, -2. Then to find the radius, that distance from the center to any point on that graph, no matter how I look at it, I'm going in a changing direction by 5, which means my radius is 5. So that means my equation then is going to be written as x plus 1 squared plus y plus 2 squared equals r squared, which is 25. Alright, so now let's look at the ellipse. Same idea, but again, there's 3 things I'll need this time. I'll still need my center, which in order to be in the center of these points, we see is going to have an x value of -2 and a y value of -1. Then I need to find the x-axis radius and the y-axis radius. So my x-axis, that distance to get from -2 to -1 is 1. Then I need to find my y radius. That y distance to go from -1 up to 4 is a distance of 5. So don't just use those numbers to write this in standard form. So remember, it's going to be x minus the x-coordinate of the center, so x minus -2, and that's divided by your x-axis radius squared, which is just 1. That's plus my y minus -1 divided by the y radius squared, and it's always equal to 1. Alright, then my last one, it's again an ellipse, but this time it's going the other direction, and since it's horizontal, that means we know that x-axis radius, that number below my x, is going to have to be bigger on this one. So let's find our center first. Okay, my center has to be at -2, 1. Then I found my x-axis radius, so that distance from -2 to 1 is a distance of 3. Then this distance up and down to get from 1 to 2 is a distance of 1. So to write this in standard form, it's going to be x plus 2 squared divided by 9 plus y minus 1 squared divided by 1, and that whole thing is equal to 1. And this is just a little bit of review from Algebra 2 to help us for the next thing we're going to be looking at about circles and ellipses.